Hi guys, welcome to Jenny's Test Kitchen. I'm Jenny and today I wanted to make something really sweet and just a little bit appropriate to the season. I don't know about anybody else, but we've been having the best strawberries recently. They're so in season in England at the minute, and I think because of the slightly warmer weather we've just had like the most delicious strawberries. I also got gifted by my lovely mum a new cookbook, so I wanted to take that on a little spin as well. Anyone living in or around London will be very familiar with Gail's. It's a very popular bakery, coffee shop. Some people are very protective of it, some people absolutely love it, some people hate it and they think it's just like any other chain. I personally really like it. I think it's like a nice little addition to most neighbourhoods, and I like that they keep it seasonal as well. The cookbook is full of some of their like really famous recipes, and I just wanted to try out something in here. So I've chosen their tartlets, which is like a little sweet biscuit base with a whipped mascarpone cream topped with lemon curd and then topped with strawberries. Now I'm already a bit nervous about this recipe because you can kind of see it's written in like really dense paragraphs and I have alarm bells ringing already. This might be me being like really picky, but you can see in the makes section here it says makes 8 tartlets 9 centimeters in diameter. Every single tart or like individual recipe in this book has a different diameter. I do not like that. And if anyone has seen Nigella talk about how she writes recipe books, she talks about how she makes sure that all of her recipes use the same diameter cake tin or the same diameter loaf tin, or they use like the same width pan, because she said home kitchens do not have a million different size tart tins. That's something that only like a professional kitchen would have. So I'm already a little bit worried that this recipe will have been tested with this specific size tart tin. I don't know what size my tart tin is, so we're already going to try and find that out. So let's get started and we'll see how we do. I'm going to start with the lemon curd and the pastry because they both need to be chilled, and then we're gonna actually start baking properly. So let's get going. So we start off by juicing the lemons. The best way to do this is by rolling them out. It just means that you can get the best juice out of them. You can also actually heat them up in the microwave very, very briefly. Don't explode them as I have done in the past. This recipe called for 100 millilitres of juice. Again, this is probably just me getting a bit of a bugbear of mine, but that is so non-specific. I know that that's just the recipe trying to be as accurate as possible on how much liquid you're trying to get in there, but is that 1 lemon, 2 lemon, 3, 4? I actually used 2.5 lemons for that. So I just kept going and kept squeezing until I had exactly the right amount. But yeah, it completely depends on the size of your lemons here. I actually find making lemon curd really relaxing. Every recipe I've ever tried has been completely different. Just find one that works for you. This one was actually quite a nice one. So you can see here that I'm mixing the juice and the sugar in a hot pan and just heating it on a really low heat just until that sugar dissolves. And then I've got the sugar and the corn flour in a separate bowl here. Again, the recipe was a little confusing about how much I needed to mix at different quantities here, but it was just one of those things where I had to be absolutely sure about what I was doing before I started. Here I'm whisking the egg yolks and putting that corn flour and the sugar in there and making sure it's whisked really, really well. I also can't get over how yellow those egg yolks were at the time, like what the hell. And then you can see that sugar has completely dissolved in the lemon juice, so I'm just going to really, really slowly go in to the wet liquids there and make sure that this is going to come together really nicely. I'm always so cautious about doing this because it can seize up and you can again get scrambled eggs, so just do this really, really carefully. Once all of that has come together, I'm going to combine that on the heat. Make sure all of that is whisked together on a really, really low heat on the hob. Keep whisking, keep making sure that that's not ever really left on its own. I have to keep an eye on this. I have been there before where I've left it completely boil over. You don't want to get to that point. What you're looking for here is for those big bubbles to appear. You're kind of looking for it to start simmering and thickening on its own. That corn flour will start to do its job eventually, you just have to be patient. So I have sped up so you can see those bubbles appearing on the left side of the pan there. That's exactly what I was looking for. And as soon as I started mixing here, it thickened up really, really quickly. So this is where you kind of need to control the heat really, really effectively here. And you can see there it's completely thickened. You can see it's leaving a mark on the bottom where I'm whisking. It's coming together really, really nicely here. And that's when you need to turn off the heat. The recipe was actually really clear about what to do here. I think if it hadn't been, I would have been a lot less confident about what to do. So you just turn off the heat, let those bubbles, get rid of the steam, and then we're going to transfer over to a bowl and make sure you cover the top so that the cling film touches the top of the surface. This is just to stop a nasty skin forming on top while it's cooling down. I have been there before when that skin is formed. It's not the end of the world, but you just don't want it there. And then we're going to start with the pastry. This is actually a really unique pastry recipe. I've never really done something like this before. It was really, really heavy on the butter content, which isn't unusual for pastry. And then you add the icing sugar, blitz away, and it kind of makes a paste at this point, so you can kind of see. I'm going to show you the consistency here because the recipe said you should be looking for a paste-like consistency. I didn't really know what it was talking about until I saw that creamy consistency. It actually looks exactly like when you're creaming butter and sugar together. And then I've just added 2 egg yolks there to bring it together. You don't add any water into the mix at all, so it's your only liquid really is from the butter and the egg yolks, which I thought was quite interesting. And then we go in with flour, and the flour is what brings it together in a dough form. The dough is really, really, really soft at this point. So you'll see here it comes together really quickly. There's not really much pulsing that's needed. So I used a food processor for this, but there was actually a hand method that was provided in the recipe, which I thought was really helpful because I know that not everybody likes to do pastry in a food processor. I just transferred this over to cling film. I just used the bowl for my own ease. This wasn't in the recipe. And as you can see there, the texture is really, really unique. It is so, so soft at this point. I was hoping that it would firm up quite a lot in the fridge just so it was workable. But you can see there it's like putty. And just form it into a ball so that I could put that in the fridge. And it was recommended that it would go in the fridge for at least 2 hours. So we're back to the lemon curd now. You can see this is really like a recipe that has got several working parts. So you can see there that it's quite thick, not much movement, and we're going to add all of that butter in really, really gradually. This takes quite a long time and quite a lot of patience, so I've just sped this up just so you can see what the impact is eventually. So once you've got all that butter in there, it's all whisked and all combined, that you get that lovely, lovely silky texture, and it should be to the texture where once you lift it up with a spoon, it starts creating ribbons. So you can see there, pick it up with the whisk and it starts leaving a mark. Now, I don't have a tart tin, bit of a difficulty, but I did have a Yorkshire pudding tin that was exactly the right size. This is a pastry cutter that I used. I wanted to use that fluted edge to get that lovely, lovely edge. So this was now 2 or 3 hours later and I came to do the pastry. I came to roll out the pastry. So I had my tin ready, I had my pastry cutter ready, and I was ready to go with the rolling pin as well. So I just floured my surface, floured my rolling pin. I should have, in hindsight, done that a lot better, but you can still see that that pastry is so soft. I would say the texture is now more like Play-Doh. It was actually quite playful, to be honest. Really satisfying to work with. up to a point. You'll see the problems that I start having in a second, and I definitely should have used more flour on the surface, but you can see it's very, very malleable, really, really soft to work with. But I do think that I kind of got frustrated with this to a point because it started breaking really, really easily, it started splitting, and the cracks were starting to show really quickly. I would compare this more to biscuit dough rather than a pastry dough, which I'll come back to when I describe how it tasted. I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but I think when I went into working with this, I thought that it was going to behave like a pastry dough, which kind of surprised me in how I wanted to work with it. Oh yeah, so you can see my desperate attempts to cobble together any sort of shape from this now. So I think at this point I should have probably cut the shapes from here now instead of trying to make it any thinner, because you can see now chunks start coming off on the rolling pin. But that's fine, it worked out okay. It just was quite difficult to work with, especially when you're in a hot, small kitchen like mine was at this point. Luckily the shapes cut out really nicely, I didn't have any problems with sticking, and they didn't stick to the pastry case or anything like that, so that was quite nice. And I just put those aside to create one more. I've actually got some spare pastry in the freezer, so I just needed to make one more, so I just did this really quickly. I actually made half the recipe because me and my boyfriend cannot eat 8 pastries. I mean, I'm sure we could, but I don't think we'd be living for very much longer if we wanted to. So this is what they look like just before they went into the oven. So they need 30 minutes additional chilling time before they go in, and then this is what they look like afterwards. I'm a bit sad that they didn't keep the fluted edge. They probably needed a bit longer in the fridge, but that's absolutely fine. Now I wanted to create that lovely pastry cream on top, so I went into a larger bowl with some mascarpone cream. Mascarpone cream is honestly like crack for me, I could have it in everything. So I went into a bowl with some mascarpone cream and some icing sugar as well and creamed those together. This wasn't particularly difficult, it was just about making sure that you get the right consistency, but I've just sped this up for your viewing pleasure here. And then I go into a smaller bowl with some whipping cream. Do not do what I did and leave the stand mixer too long and end up making butter by accident. Luckily I had more cream so I could make it again, and what you're actually wanting to do is whip the cream into stiff peaks so that you can fold the cream and the mascarpone mix together like I'm doing here. It should come together into a really lovely thick mix that you can dollop onto the pastry cases like I'm doing here. It was a really lovely consistency, and because I'd added icing sugar and the vanilla as well, just a lovely sweetness that wasn't too much, like a really, really nice mix. My boyfriend came and licked the spoon while I was making this, so that is always a good measure of how nice a recipe is. What is quite nice about the recipe is that there's nothing really too faffy about the assembly of this. It's really just about how much you want on there and how messy or dainty you want them to be. I wanted them to be quite piled, but not so piled that it was uncomfortable to eat, so you can see that I'm just roughly spooning them onto the cases there, and just making that the cream is relatively evenly distributed across the cases. By this point, your lemon curd will have chilled throughout the day and it'll be perfect consistency to dollop on top of that cream. Again, that lemon curd was so delicious, like really, really creamy because of the addition of the butter and a really nice addition to this pastry. I think the mix of the mascarpone cream and the biscuity, almost sort of burnt sugar texture of the pastry was an absolutely perfect combination, and everything was really nicely offset by the cream, so a definite winner in my eyes. I then topped it off with some chopped strawberries, and I think the combination did work really well. I think the recipe overall was a really good win for us and a nice weekend treat, but not something that I would probably be making again. I think the recipe was kind of involved, a bit faffy and quite detailed in areas where it probably didn't need to be, but a nice change from what I usually do. If you've liked this recipe and you'd like to see me make something similar, or you have an idea of a recipe that you'd like me to try out on your behalf, please do send me a message or comment below. I'd love to hear your ideas. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Jenny, this is Jenny's Test Kitchen, and this was Gail's creamed mascarpone and lemon curd tartlets. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and I can't wait to give you more content soon.